Come on, YouTube. Catch up. Hi, everybody. So, before we get rolling too fast, Greg, welcome to Auto Synkless. Thanks for becoming a member, man. I greatly appreciate it. It's a way to start the stream. Haven't even started jabberjawing my mouth, and somebody became a member. That's pretty cool. So, before I get into the topic, we'll kind of let people get in, get past the YouTube's ad, whatever. Today's kind of an interesting day in that this is my 1 year anniversary of starting my current job over at Microsoft. And on my way home, believe it or not, it's raining in the Seattle area. And I got the joy of, like, just outside my house, basically, having not one, but like 2.5 rainbows. So, take that with whatever grain of salt you want. But it's just like, oh, that's kind of nice. It's a little pretty thing when I come home. And I just realized I left the window open, so it might be a little extra loud with street noise tonight. Sorry about that. But kind of just a nice, like, cheery feeling, right? So, with that being said, we'll dive into the topic in a sec. Say hi to all you folks. By the way, really cool that people have been digging kind of like my pseudo history, like personal story about angelfish from last Saturday. I think the video that's coming up this Saturday, you guys are gonna like. I might need to like expand it a little deeper long term, but I'm gonna cover some filtration information. It'll be like kind of pseudo educational, and then we'll get back toward some of the other, like the comparing the JCMP light to that light I ordered from China, stuff like that. That's coming. Don't worry. But there's a couple small things I want to cover that are kind of on the educational side first, and then we'll get into that and all my results from the JCMP light testing and all that kind of stuff. So let's talk the ancient question that most YouTubers get when it comes to fish is like, what fish, and sometimes it's plant, in my case, a lot of times it's plant, should I put in my fish tank, right? I'm putting up a new tank, or I have this tank. What's the fish I should put in it? We get this a lot. For me, usually it's like, what rainbow should I put in my tank, or what rainbow should I buy? Plant is really, really common for me. Like, I have this fish, what plant should I get? And I kind of want to go over the way that I approach this question. Some of you who've been here for a while, you've probably heard me rant and rave about this, but I kind of wanted to make it more topical, because I think if it's like buried in a live stream question, it's less likely to be seen for people that watch replays. But if it's the topic of one, right, they'll see this. So when I get this question, I want to talk about how I make this selection, right? So when I first was getting back into the hobby, before like I really had hardcore dedicated myself to rainbow fish, and just found that passion in that one species, family, genus. I think it's technically family, right? Because it's all the Melanitaniidae, which is family, not genus or species. I can science occasionally. How I would pick fish for my first couple of tanks are really simple. And this is the advice I would give anyone. If you have a local fish store, go to your local fish store. Go in there knowing I am not spending money today on any fish. I am not buying any fish. You can buy fish food, you could buy plants, you could buy whatever. That's fine. This is for fish. And it's the same for plants if you're doing it this way, but go in and look at every single tank. Now, if you have like a multi store where it's like they have saltwater and freshwater and African cichlids in this, maybe only do the section of the type of fish you're setting that tank up for, right? Look at every tank. Look at every fish in each of those tanks. Look at them for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, a little bit of time. Don't just like walk past it, barely glance at it. I mean, stare at that tank for a couple minutes. Comments in chat are getting great. That's why I'm stopping. I'm sorry. Because what I'm saying is driving a few people wild, right? Now, after you've looked at every tank that's appropriate, so if you're doing like a nano tank, you've looked at all the nano fish. If you're doing an African cichlid tank, you've looked at all the African cichlids, right? Whatever we're going for. Think about for a few minutes, and of all the fish I looked at, what are the 3 or 4 fish I want to go look at again? Or plants, in this case, if you're doing plants, right? Go back and look at those ones. But this time, spend 5, 10, 15 minutes at each of those tanks. And I'm sure like 15 minutes will probably drive your local fish store crazy, especially if they're trying to, like, during the pandemic, limit the number of people in the shop and stuff like that. I get it. Do what you can. But in many cases, like, if they've seen you enough, they just know to leave you alone. You'll get them when you need them, right? Look at all those fish. 3, 4 of them, however many it was, that came to mind where it's like, I really want to go look at that one again. Now that you've looked at them all again for that 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is you choose, which one stands out to you that, like, when I get home and I'm at my home tank, I can picture watching that fish for an hour at a time, 2 hours at a time, 3 hours at a time, an hour every day, half an hour every day, whatever it is, right? However you interact with your fish tanks. Because you'll know when you spent this much time already, that's the one I want to keep watching. That's the one that right now, that's the one I want to watch. Now remember, I said we're not spending money on this trip. Not on fish or plants, whatever one you intended to buy. You can buy all your other stuff. If you've been there that long, maybe find a reason to buy a tin of fish food or something, right? Spend a couple bucks. Go home, research that fish, so that when you go back the next time and buy it, you're buying the right number for your tank. You've got the conditions already set and ready. So, like, the temperature range is right. If you have like super soft water like I do, and you're doing African cichlids, you've buffered the water so that the pH and hardness is right. Whatever it may be, you've done what you need to do to make sure that tank is a great environment for that fish to not only survive but thrive. Then go back and buy that fish. Perfect. Do the same thing with plants. You can go in, you can look at the plant selection, take your time. It's a little easier with plants, right? Because you can know, like, I can plant this now and let it grow in and get settled. But I honestly feel that nowadays, if we take more time, like I'm totally guilty of this, by the way. When I got back to the hobby, I impulse buy all the time. But a lot of time I would impulse buy the things I remember having as a kid that I liked. Cardinal tetras, Danios, right? These are things that I kind of impulse bought when I got back into the hobby. But it's because I remember loving them as a kid. I didn't buy something new that I'd never had right away. I bought the stuff I loved as a kid. I think, like, when I look at fish nowadays, like, most of the time, you guys know that's going to be rainbows. It's probably going to be a rarer or newer rainbow. So my already I'm super narrow in that field down, right? But I will go through this process, like, I'll talk to either a breeder I know that has several different fish I like, or I'll look on Aquabid when all the bigger names that I trust the most are putting their fish up. And I'll research fish for like a week. I'll go back and I'll keep looking at the same pictures of fish over and over and over again. And I'll try and find videos or find other pictures of that fish, because I want to not let, like, one picture or one thing that one time settle my mind. I take that time because I want to make sure when I get that fish home, it's not like a honeymoon period of like a week where I'm like, yeah, I'm so excited about this new fish. And then I'm moving on going like, what do I want to get next? Right? I want to know that I am so thrilled that I got that fish and I have that fish in my home, that every time I go buy that tank, I'm going to kind of like take those few minutes to stare at them and just kind of appreciate them. Because that happens on my weekends. Like I work, last week, let me give you an example, right? I worked my normal hours, about 50. It was a light week. And then I got told Thursday at the end of the day, hey, we need emergency weekend coverage. It's just Saturday for now, but it might be Sunday too. Oh, and by the way, we need the most experienced team members. So AKA, it instantly kicked half of my team, more than half of my team, off the list. And it went to me and the other person who's like my co-lead, right? I talked to my co-lead real fast. I'm like, hey, Steve, they've got this weekend thing going on. Do you have major plans, or do you just want the time off? Because I'm willing to come in and work if you want the time off. He's like, I would really like to have the weekend off. I haven't been sleeping all that well this week. I'd like to just have the weekend to rest. Great, no problem. Enjoy your weekend. I'll be here. So I came in Saturday, right? And I worked another full shift. And the only other guy who was like covering for another team, he, one of the bridges from Seattle to where we work in Redmond was closed. And it was the direct way for him to get in. So he had to pay $50 for an Uber to go from his house to our work. So when we were done with work, I was like, hey, dude, don't worry about getting an Uber or anything like that. I'll take you home. But because the bridge is closed down, traffic is a freaking nightmare. So it took me 2 hours basically to go from work to drop him off to get home. So I worked a full day, plus 2 hours of random commuting to help my coworker get home, before I finally got to get home to my house to appreciate my dogs, my lady, my fish, and do all my chores around my house. So Sunday, I'm doing water changes, right? You know what I love about water changes? I get to sit there, and I'm basically forced, while the water's changing, to spend time appreciating my fish. Every time I get to do, I have the time to do proper water changes as opposed to just top-offs, and I get to sit and watch each fish in each tank, it's not work anymore. Because I've taken the time to cultivate the fish I want. I've taken that same process nearly every time. Been very, very thorough. Made sure that the fish I bought were ones that every time I get to look at them, I am going to appreciate them as much as I did when I first shopped for them. And I look back to when I got back into the hobby and I used to impulse buy. And I think about, like, did I appreciate the fish that I impulse bought as much as I appreciate the fish now? And it took me time, crazy as this might sound, to remember some of the fish I impulse bought. Outside of, like, Danios and Cardinal Tetras and a couple of Plecostomus, right? I had to think hard to remember what fish I had purchased. It would have been easier for me to go back and look at my old YouTube stuff when I first started doing YouTube for fish and looked at the stuff I bought. And the only one I could think of that was kind of an impulse, which is just the number I bought as opposed to the species of fish. I'm down to like only 3 of them left because they're getting old. It's my my Kochu Tetras. And I remember very recently looking back at a couple pictures of them when I had them in their prime, and I had a lot of them, and just going, man, I think I want that fish again. Because I like that fish so much. That was a fish I researched. And the only impulse to buying them was how many of them I bought, as opposed to, like, originally I was thinking I'll get like 20 or 30 of them. I bought 85. Bought a massive colony of them. And man, they were so cool like that. I think if we take more time, and this is my philosophy, be clear here. I think if we take more time being absolutely certain about the fish we buy or the plants we buy, we're going to enjoy them so much more. That maintenance time, that time feeding your fish, you're just going to sit there naturally and take those few extra seconds, that few extra minutes, and appreciate them. I love all the Office Space quotes in chat, by the way. we might have to do like a live stream at some point where I talk more directly about my work, just because a lot of people seem to be really interested in it. But so from the plant perspective, let me give you a different option, right? Fish, we can take all this time. One of the things that gets me about plants and what gets me excited about new plants, other than just I haven't done it yet, which is most of it. It's like my own challenge. Now that I've done a lot of plants, I start looking for ways to combine different leaf textures. So prime example, that thumbnail that I had is a Limnophila species called chinensis. It's kind of commonly just called Limnophila curly. It has this like single curl to the leaf. It's like a little corkscrew, right? And what I love about it is that I can have that in there with something nice and straight like Java fern. And the colors and textures are so different that each plant stands out on its own. It can be all green. Like there's a mixture of greens in that tank, but every single thing stands out because it has a different leaf texture and size. This is the thing that like I get excited about when I play with plants, is like, how can I mix not color but leaf texture? Because most of the time, like, I tend to prefer the green plants over red because most of my rainbow fish are bright colors. So I want that green background to make all the, like, the oranges and reds and blues and all this stuff pop, right? And I like a little bit of red as a little highlight somewhere, but typically, nowadays, I use more and more simpler green plants where I'm mixing leaf texture to get an effect or to get some kind of appearance I really like, rather than like, what's the craziest, coolest thing I can grow? What's the rarest plant I can get? Don't get me wrong, I love rare plants, and I do a lot of that for my own personal challenges. But when it comes to like aquascaping, which we all know I can't aquascape, right? I can put plants in places and make them grow, and I'm good at that, and that's about it. But I take, every time I'm putting a tank together, like when I did the running river tank, as I've nicknamed it, I took the plants I love the most out of my old Plants for Profit tank, and all I thought of was like, how can I mix the different leaf textures together? And there is a slight variation in color, right? There's kind of a brownish green as opposed to a bright green, and put them in a way that like makes each plant its own natural highlight, and yet at the same time can blend together so that if you're focused on one plant, everything else kind of just naturally, you blur it out of your mind for a second. And then when you move to the next one, everything else blurs out and that comes into focus, right? Kind of like watching a movie where you have that focus that shifts and everything else becomes blurry except that one thing that was blurry before. That super cinematic stuff that like Jimmy can do and I'm terrible at. That's how like my brain works when I'm putting things together in a tank. And I hope that this like long rant about selecting things might influence some of you in the future, because I think if we take that little extra time thinking about how we do things or what we want to buy next, of setting up a new tank, what do I want to do, I think we will appreciate them far, far more. Far, far more. So with that being said, we'll start getting into questions. As usual, at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see stuff. We've got a few questions that are in chat. I'll make sure to get those, and a couple highs that I want to say. One, Sergeant Tanks, good to see you, buddy. It's been a while. I'm glad I've been seeing you like doing a little bit more regular stuff, not like, you know, it's fully scheduled, like I'm on this schedule every day, but just seeing you pop in and out, kind of the Fish Fam YouTube a little more. It's good to see you back, buddy. Of course, Mass Eyes in the house. What's up? If you guys don't know, after the stream, Greater Seattle Aquarium Society has a talk for one of their meetings, and it's a killifish talk. So that should be really, really sweet. Definitely check that out. I noticed Candy's not in chat, so I can't like cheat and have free links all day. I'll get a link for you soon. Promise. Let's see here. Now, I want to try and catch up on some questions because there were a couple really good ones. If for some reason I miss your question, feel free to repost it. Or if all else fails, shoot me an email, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. I've been doing my best to catch up on email this week because it's finally like calming just enough to catch up on email. Last week was like the super nightmare scenario train. But yeah. Lots of people commenting about stuff. A lot of people like that angelfish video. I'm really glad you did. My buddy Preston John, the Puffer God's in. I made a joke that I'm going to make him a sign for his fish room that says the Pufferland Ranch. Because just he's so good at those things. And I appreciate a few comments about me getting my ears lowered. My hair was like turning into an absolute mess. I'm a short hair guy. Like, if I start having like wings grow out the side of my hat, I have a problem. All right. I know I had a good question. I gotta find it again. Oh, and then for those that don't know, just because I'm staring at it, Rico Stan, who's in chat, we're going to do an interview live stream this Saturday. So, just hopefully if y'all go check it out, I'll make sure when I have if I got a link to it, schedule that for me, Rico Stan, so I can I'll put it in my community tab for those that are interested. I have no clue what he's going to ask me. We're just going to slam down and have some fun. Ninja Store MC just started a 50-gallon with huge pieces of wood, fully planted, lots of hiding places. How would you recommend me to feed my Galaxy Rasboras? They always hide, and I rarely see them. Shy fish. This is a thing. And a Galaxy Rasbora, so also Celestial Pordeño, I'm assuming. Same fish. That's usually the Galaxy Rasbora. Just depends on where you come from, what they call it. So what I have tended to do when I have really shy fish is I really powder my food up as much as I can if it's a flake so that it gets well distributed in the tank. And typically, when you powder it, it sinks a lot slower. So I'll throw a bunch of food in, and then I'll walk away. The other thing you can start doing is getting smellier food. And this is usually stuff with more garlic in it, but the krill flake from Extreme is actually a really good example of food that like fish just naturally gravitate toward. So is the bug bites, or not bug bites, Hikari Vibra bites. Bug bites can be good, but it's not quite as like stinky in the water, if you will, as some of the other foods. The Vibra bites is especially good because a lot of fish seem to think it's like bloodworms, although it does sink a little bit quicker. The other thing you could really get into is just regularly hatch either live baby brine or keep frozen food, because the frozen foods tend to stay up in the water column a little longer, especially the small stuff like cyclops and baby brine shrimp. And the way that I like to do it is I'll go right by a filter outlet and I'll hold the cube in a pair of tongs so that it really disperses into the water well rather than just sitting and floating. Although in the case of them hiding a lot, you might want to let that cube more slowly fall apart and walk away. And I know it sucks because you don't get to watch your fish eat, but if they're surviving in there and you're seeing them, they're finding a way to eat. Just make sure that you don't put like hyper aggressive eaters in there. So like rainbow fish, for example, things that like are just going to dominate eating food, and those fish will do fine. And eventually like they'll get more and more used to, they'll figure out like food happens when that human comes over. And eventually they will get a little less shy and come out when you're feeding them. It just takes time. It's the sucky part about shy fish is it's one of those things where like eventually they figure it out. You coming close to the tank usually means food. I like food. Let's go out. Right? Eventually fish figure it out, but it can suck for sometimes like months for them to actually like get used to you being around. Drew Overly. I've had good success with Anubias and Crypts, but stem plants keep melting, rotting away. Any thoughts where to start figuring out my issues? So, I mean, there's like a million reasons this can occur. But in general, if you're planting your stems right away, so like I bought a thing of plants, I am immediately getting home and pushing them into the substrate. Stop doing that. Immediately stop doing that. What you should do is if they're already weighted or in a pot, put them in your tank and let them sit there. Let them adjust to your water. Because almost always any of the stem plants we grow, they're grown immersed. And they have to convert naturally and they usually have to grow some amount of roots. And even if they have roots, those roots are accustomed to a different water system than your own. So if you make it so that they're not fighting down low in that substrate, they have easy access to all the water column nutrients. They'll grow a little easier. Make sure we have good light, but don't overbear them with light, right? Once you start seeing a little bit of new growth, especially in the root area, if you get just like trimmed stems as opposed to ones that are already rooted, if you see fresh white roots, that's what we are looking for, especially in the case of stems, is nice white roots, then plant them. Now, a lot of times we're getting them immersed and they're going to convert and melt some anyway. And a lot of what we're looking for is toward the top of the plant. We want to start seeing some new leaves and aerial roots. And what we're going to do is once we get aerial roots, like let's say this is the whole stem, and I start getting a little bit of aerial roots up here and a couple new leaves up here. Right below where those aerial roots start, I'm going to cut away the rest of the stem. And I'm going to throw that away. Let me explain why. When a stem breaks or gets cut, it triggers the bottom of our new top section that I need to grow more roots now and grab onto something so that I can survive. And if we have just a little bit of root to start and we trigger that area where the roots are, right where that cut is, it's going to trigger more and more root growth. The plant is going to focus its nutrients toward root growth. Plant it, it'll get settled. The new growth is already converted, and you shouldn't have a whole huge tall stem. You know, a lot of times you get a stem, it's like this tall. It's only a couple inches. But that part is converted to your water system and ready to go. And you've gotten the hard part out of the way, and now it's just being patient. One of the ways that can be really helpful to speed this up is something like Flourish Advance, or higher levels of trace minerals. You could use like Florin Multi, Flourish Trace. Florin Multi, by the way, is done by Brightwell. If that's local to you, especially in the United States, I actually like it a lot more than Flourish Trace or even Flourish Advance. Basically, what you want is the micronutrients that help facilitate additional root growth. Advance is designed specifically for this, is why I usually suggest that plant, that plant supplement. I can English, I promise. Basically, the goal here is to allow your plants to convert first to your water system, then cut away all the stuff that's old growth, because it's going to try and waste too much energy trying to keep that alive. Get rid of it and make that plant focus all of its energy, all of that nutrients together toward new growth. And you'll have a significantly higher level of success doing it that way. Now, if you have CO2, you almost never have to do this. Like sitting a plant in for maybe a week is enough with CO2. But it could be a longer process, say 2 weeks, without the CO2 before you have a good point to cut and plant. Generally, I found that if I do that process, I have significantly higher levels of success. Hopefully, that helps, Drew. Sierra Delta. Bentley, I'm stressing out. I have to move my 33-gallon heavy planted tank to my new 75-gallon. Can I just move everything over, transfer all my old biofilter media, substrate, etc., and just monitor it? Yes. So here's the thing. Keep the filter media wet, okay? Try to move some of that tank water over if you can. So like literally when you're draining it, try to drain it into the 75 if you can, or in buckets and get some of that water over there. And part of the reason, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, old tank water doesn't do anything. Actually, yes, it does. It carries a certain amount of bacteria within it naturally. It'll help colonize the new tank better, right? In the new tank, we have a significantly larger volume of area, so we probably need some extra substrate or something like that to get the right... how do I get this? To get everything the way it was equivalently in that 33-gallon to a 75-gallon. And maybe you're just going thinner substrate. That's fine. Or only one area has substrate, the rest is something else. That also can work. But just transferring everything, keep all the biofilter media wet. It'll be okay for a little bit. Just put it in a bucket, transfer it over, transfer all your stuff. It'll do fine for a day. If it's more than a few days, that's where it has trouble. And the one thing you can do is just put an air stone and run an air pump in that bucket. Keep that bacteria aerated, because that's aerobic bacteria that's usually in our filter. You'll be just fine. Just fine. Should be easy. The bigger stress is usually like when you're doing that big of a transfer. Some plants get finicky and like get a little angry for a little while, but they come back. Just, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. We're getting to the point where everybody's chattering to each other. Kyle's aquametrics. Dang it, I can never get that right. I read it one way and then like my brain just doesn't want to process the "r." It's just aqua. One day I will get it right the first time. All the time in the office is tough. Do they let you have a fish tank in your office at least? No, not at all. I work in an extremely secure area, and we deal with lots of prototype hardware that has extremely high restrictions on it. So having water in that area is not going to fly. Yeah, no fish tanks at work. Plus, I'm that kind of person. Like, I don't want to have to like figure out how to do water changes and stuff at work. I can do that really easy at home. It's much easier for me to like relax and enjoy my fish at home than I will ever be able to appreciate them at work. I'm so busy at work, I barely be able to look at a tank. And it's just a matter of what my job is and how busy we are. We have really strict deadlines for stuff. It's just crazy times there, but I love what I do, so there's that too. Filigree Aquatics, yeah, spending 2 hours doing water changes and really getting tanks feels good afterwards. Yes, definitely does. I love, like, as much as like I kind of loathe like doing water changes in the sense it's like I would love to have this automated and not be manually doing it. It does also give me time where I'm just spending time with my fish and my tanks. I actually caught a problem in one of my tanks because of water changes over last weekend. And then found a filter that had been spilling some water because a bunch of Riccia had gotten into the filter and it was still growing despite not getting very much light, and had actually pushed the lid open in one spot and started growing over the side, so water was wicking up the Riccia off the back of the filter. Yeah, not too thrilled about that, but figured it out, got the problem done. My floors aren't covered in mold, aren't like horrible and wet and destroyed, but there's like a little piece of wood on the back windowsill that I'm going to have to like rip out and replace. Ricky is the devil, by the way. I've done Ricky once and never want to do it ever again. Apparently somebody asked like where I work. James Black asked at some point, because somebody else... James Black, where does Bentley work outside of YouTube? I work as a contractor to Microsoft on a project called IVAS. IVAS. If you look that up on YouTube, you will find out what I work on. It stands for Integrated Visual Augmentation System. It's for the Army. Making Call of Duty real, man. It's pretty fun, honestly. Like, now that some of the stuff's out in the public and I can like lightly talk about what I do, it's really cool. Like, building basically a high-tech piece of information system for soldiers is a really cool project, and there's a very interesting dynamic when you're working very directly with soldiers and getting their feedback and trying to integrate that into a product that is designed to give them information to protect them and minimize all sorts of potential problems long term, right? Whether it's being a training aid or eventually, like, of course, the kind of future soldier mentality of being out in the war field and maybe having certain things that prevent like civilian issues or IEDs, things like that. Like, it's a very rewarding project to work on because it's designed to protect as opposed to be a weapon. It's pretty sweet. To me, very sweet. Plus, my dad's dad was in the Army, so there's like a little bit of military in my family. It's good times. It's very demanding, but it's good times. Oh man, Chad just jumped. That's how far behind I am. Knight Rider. Awesome rant, great topic. Have you ever done Dutch style aquarium? So a proper Dutch aquarium, no. I tend to say that most of my tanks are kind of like Dutch inspired in the sense that I do what is most commonly called jungle style, where it's just like put a bunch of plants and and let them grow. But I usually cluster them a lot like a Dutch style would do. But that being said, like high level aquascaping like that, because there's a very special technique to doing that, or like the Brazilian style is like Dutch and nature style had a baby and made this amazing, beautiful thing. I leave that to people like Green Aqua or George Farmer or Yuri's or like all these like legitimately good aquascapers. I just put plants in water and they grow. And most of the time, like, you got to keep in mind, most of my tanks are rainbow fish, right? And so I have to make sure there's lots of room for those rainbow fish to swim because they need a lot of swim room. So often I'm planting in a way that's designed to make sure there's lots of swim room and not too much hardscape for my fish to like bash their brains into, because rainbow fish are not the smartest, and they will, while sparring or courting girls, just like ram straight into a rock. Because they're very pretty, but they're not the brightest fish in the world. Brian N. I'm at the point where I now have a list of fish I want to get once I've got room. If they can stay on the list for a year plus, I really want them. Actually, I'm kind of now in a similar boat where I have like the checklist of fish I want, and it's a matter of can I find them or do I have space? A lot of times it tends to be actually like, do I have space more recently than it is can I find them. I can usually find just about anything I'm looking for, but sometimes it takes time, right? Samuel Mendoza. One of the only fish I've ever thoroughly researched has become my absolute favorite, the honeycomb catfish. I bought 6. That's a really sweet fish. They're really cool. It's not like a type of fish that I get worried because I keep rainbows and they can be really shy, right? And rainbows will like eat everything before they ever get to the food. So they're on my list of like, that fish is cool. A lot of like the wood cats and stuff like that. But I can't keep them because rainbows will just eat everything. It's like little jerks. But I love them so much, I can't help it. Hey, Candy the Supermod's in the house. What's up? Good to see you, Candy. Hope you're doing well. Mike from the Fish Tank Barn. I actually recently watched one of Mike's videos talking about rare goodeids and how to keep them, where they come from. Would you ever get any goodeids? So, there are some rarer live bearers that I really like. Mostly the Yucatan sailfin molly, so the Volifera molly, the one that Greg Sage used to breed, but now he's had so much trouble like breeding enough of them that he kind of like let some other people take over that have been really, really successful with them. However, part of the reason why I've avoided goodeids is mostly because I keep a lot of my rooms warm, and warmer than the goodeids like to be. There's the Zeogeneticus tequila, the tequila goodeiid, has been really popular here in the Seattle area. There's like a ton of them, and that's one of the ones that I do like quite a lot. I'm trying to remember. There is a goodeiid I really like, and I always struggle to remember the name of it. But it's not as rare as some of the stuff that you have, Mike. But I think it's a trout goodeiid. Might be the one. I need to like literally see the name to remember. Juan Alberto Fisher Canales. That's a good one. Ancistrus and planted tanks. What do you think? So I keep Ancistrus in planted tanks. It's all about not having swords, basically, because they'll eat the swords to death. A lot of what I tend to think is smart for Ancestrid with planted tanks is using lots of epiphytes. So your Anubiuses, your Booses, your Java Ferns, they'll do a good job of cleaning a lot of those, or even Crypts in some cases, but you need to make sure they have swim space along the bottom. The same with Cories, right? The same rule kind of applies between Ancestors and Cories. They need to have room to go along the bottom, otherwise they're just going to whip their bodies around and unroot a lot of those plants. But if they have good swim space to go around and kind of like pathways, if you will, to hide between some of those plants, you can be successful with a lot of plants. I just wouldn't go for any like super dense stems, lots of epiphytes, or you could do things like nymphaea species, so like any of the lilies or lotuses. You can do stuff like crypts pretty well with them. They will move around them and stuff, and a lot of times land on them, rest on them, clean them. Those tend to be better than like really dense stems. And I would never do swords because they'll just eat the swords. As any of the ancestors will just eat sword plants like crazy. You can also do some of the like Aponegitans, like Madagascar lace and that kind of stuff. They also do pretty well with Ancestris. Hi, Mr. Fisher, tell grandparent stories. You know, it's funny because like most of my, I actually have, let me like side tangent, not grandparent, but my parents. My mom has agreed recently, now granted we've got the pandemic going on and all this kind of stuff, that when the time is right, at least, and it's easier to like sit together and do something, my mom has agreed to do a video where we talk about when I was a kid going to fish stores. And maybe I can get her to tell stories about my great grandmother from when she was a kid, right? Because that's her grandma. Because she has some interesting stories that she's told me about just basically growing up in like a home zoo on an orchard out in Yakima, Washington, that's where she grew up, which is where a lot of like the apples and stuff are grown. But it's just kind of interesting to have her tell those stories because she remembers them really, really well, right? She lived them, and I'm telling them secondhand. And the one that I remember the best is always the angel food stuff, or the angelfish stuff, because that's what's been told to me umpteen million times. But I have this like really, like fish happen more in my mom's side of the family than my dad's. My dad is a big koi guy. So one of the things I really want to do at some point is talk koi with my dad and what got him into koi, if he'll do it. I don't know if my dad will go on camera. He might, and you'll see how much me and my dad look alike. But we'll see. I know my mom has agreed to it, though. And my cousin Henry's coming back. We just got to, like, schedule time. We're both crazy busy, but cousin Henry's coming back. We're doing a Petco Stories 3. Don't you worry. He's got some good ones. Stephen P., what's up, buddy? Do you believe in maintaining a specific ratio of NPK, that's the core macronutrients, as a means of preventing algae, or just making sure all macros are present? So, how do I put this? This is going to sound psychotic, crazy, all the above, lazy. I don't focus on specific ratios. So I tend to use an all-in-one fertilizer. Have I used other stuff in the past? Yes. I use all-in-one fertilizers. And I fertilize kind of every 3 days. Certain tanks don't get it as often because they don't have CO2. The ones that have CO2, they don't get a lot of CO2. And I just, if I'm like at a 40-gallon breeder and my plant density is really high and I'm right where I need to trim, it'll get 5 pumps every 3 days of easy green, right? Bam. If it's right after a trim and it's low, they get 4. When I'm really paying attention, that same 40 breeder will get every day 1 pump and then every other day an additional pump. No specific ratios. Now, however, I've been doing a lot of research in anoxic filtration, watching a lot of Dr. Novak stuff. He's setting up a new, like, really nice glass tank that he got custom built. Highly suggest watching so far because he's explaining, like, how he does his DIY plenum, some changes he's doing compared to what he's done in the past and what lessons he's learned and why, where he saved money on this custom tank by choosing certain options over other things that he could have done. Very, very interesting so far. I think there's like 4 parts right now. But yeah, he's got tons of great information. So when I get to doing my own tank with an anoxic filter system, I will be doing a very different way of getting nutrients to my plants. And that is where I'm interested in testing some interesting things, because a lot of times he's using more low demand plants where I am willing to like push CO2 and higher demand plants and see what I can and can't do with an anoxic filtration system under very different conditions than what I would do in what I consider like a more normal tank, right? Like the way that we look at aquascape tanks and stuff like that. So in the future, yes, I might be doing some really like specific things, but currently, no. I'm way too slapdash in the morning with my time to do that kind of stuff. Bottom dollar products, just talking about a friend request on Facebook. Yeah, just know that I only pay so much attention to Facebook, so it's like the worst way to message me, but I do occasionally look just because it's what I do. Raphael Swift, or SWIT, Swift. I swear there used to be an F there somewhere, unless you're somebody different. Now I'm all confused. That's how I know I'm old. I'm interested in Elenatane hydropiper and Glossostigma elenatoides for carpeting on sandy foreground. Will they do okay with liquid ferts got CO2 injection? So, coarser grained sands, yes. They can do okay. Finer grained sands, they will struggle because they have a very fine, smaller root system. They'll root in, but they might struggle to get enough nutrients in finer grained sand because not enough of it's going to move within the water column, right? Because they're doing liquid ferts. Coarser grain, it's a little easier for that water to move in that upper layer where there's that, because their roots are only going like this far down. They're not super, super deep with those plants. Can work. I would not focus on pushing too much CO2, but should work. Never something I've tried. I have so much struggle planting those kind of plants. Also, rainbow fish will just rip them up left and right. I had Glossostigma for a while, and my rainbows just were like, that's a perfect place to go spawn on. And like constantly were on top of it, just like thrashing around and just throwing plants up left and right. All those fine, cool carpeting plants like rainbows basically are just like, nah, man, you can't keep those. I love rainbows, but some of the things they limit me on drive me crazy. Brad, thank you for all the help with plants. I'm trying to float some water sprite, and it doesn't seem to be responding well. Any tips? It's extremely nitrogen hungry. So either A, overstock your tank like crazy and have lots of ammonia being produced and nitrogen through nitrates as well. Preferably ammonia. It's actually easier for that plant to handle it in a floating condition, but we won't go into the science behind this. If you have like a relatively light stocking, just if you're like, say, if you're a 40-gallon breeder, for example, just to give you an example, if you would normally do 4 pumps of Easy Green, do 5. Or like every other day, just put a little shot of an all-in-one fertilizer in it, because it really is that nitrogen hungry that it can struggle without it. But once it settles in, also if there's too much flow and it's moving around too much, it's going to get angry. If you have a way to kind of hold it in place to where it's not constantly moving, that will help that plant succeed. Because I do it all the time. I float a lot of water sprite and water wisteria. I love those plants. They're really, really good at giving additional biologic filtration. And then you just hurl out tons of stuff you don't need. James Black, how would you suggest to treat fin rot with a betta? 1 tablespoon of salt a gallon has made it only worse. I live in Canada. Oh, no. Canada's the worst part about this. So, okay, fin rot is a bacterial disease, right? The problem is, in general, you need bacterias to deal with this. However, man, I'm trying to remember. The problem is, like, I'm so spoiled because in the United States I can still get certain medicines. Now, granted, if you can get yourself to a vet that treats fish, you should be able to be like, listen, I got a betta with fin rot, help me, right? And they should be able to prescribe you something, but there is, man, I'm gonna have to look it up. I feel terrible about this, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I used to know this, and now I don't because I'm a dum-dum. Mostly because I can only store so much in my brain at once. But yeah, if you're at a really advanced stage, that's where it gets a little rough. I mean, the biggest thing is going to be like start aggressively water changing, right? Because the fin rot is a bacteria; it's in the water system. So if we start aggressively water changing, and I'm talking like 50% a day, 35% a day, constantly getting new fresh water to that fish can help a ton. Make sure that water is really, really well oxygenated. That's the other thing. Salt should help, and you might have to keep redosing salt. Just keep that in mind. Just don't... I don't know that I would go all the way to a tablespoon per gallon at this point, like, if you're aggressively water changing, but, like, you know, a tablespoon per, say, like, 5 gallons might be enough. The big thing is keep pushing those water changes to try and force the bacteria by nature to get diluted out of your tank. It's really tough. The fact that you can't get meds really sucks. If you have some form of vet that will treat fish that you can get in touch with, then you can look at something like, I think it's usually neomycin that's used, a Neoplex or it's either neo or kanamycin. It's one of the two. But yeah, man, I feel for you. I really do. Because I've had bad fin rot in a betta before that I did the bad thing. I bought a betta in bad condition from a store so that I could save it. But granted, it was only like $6, so yeah, I wasn't worried about losing $6. And that fish lived for another like 2.5 years under my care. He was an old man beta to start too. Kathy B, I want to set up a North American tank in my 75-gallon. Interesting. Although not a purist of any suggestions for cool water or native plants. So, in general, one of the best native plants for the United States and even parts of Canada is a lot of the Ludwigia species. So Ludwigia repens, Ludwigia arcuata, Ludwigia ovalis. You're going to have better success with either arcuata cross repens or Ludwigia repens naturally. They tend to be in a lot of cool water systems, including streams. I'm not sure what fish you're planning on stocking, but that'll kind of tell you, like, the flow will tell you kind of which species to look toward, whether you want the bigger, broader leaves or the smaller leaves. More flow, smaller leaves, right? Less likely to get knocked all over the place. Unfortunately, most of the things that we see nowadays are like invasive plants that are problematic. There are a couple forms of lilies, but usually they're the big ones that need ponds. And although they're not truly native, so like you're not kind of going full biotope, a lot of plants that do really well for a lot of the actual native fish that can handle cool water really well. Things like your Anubiuses, your Buses, they can handle cool water. They really can. So can Java ferns. A lot of your epiphytes can handle that stuff. But in general, if you want the true, more American stuff, Ludwigia species gonna be your best friend. You could also technically look towards some of the hair grasses, just because there are versions of that that are much taller than what we see out in nature than what we would get in the aquarium. But like dwarf hair grass can also do really well. It looks like I've almost caught up with chat, which has to be a lie. Naidu, any clear where I can find zebra horned nearite snails? I can't seem to find them anywhere. Actually, I very recently talked to Jason at Redfish Bluefish about a lot of the different varieties of horned nearites. It's getting very hard to source them right now, which is why it's hard to find them. And some of the cooler patterns are especially becoming very hard to source, in part because of human malware. It's just making it a absolute pain in the butt to get stuff shipped in, because a lot of those are shipped in from places to the big distributors, right? They get them in mass amounts to distributors. They're having trouble getting them in the first place. So realistically, do I have a good source for them right now? Not really. Jason at Redfish Bluefish, I know he's trying to source a couple different of the horned neorites. I don't know if he's looking for zebras, but you could try getting in contact with him through his website, which is redfishbluefish.shop. I think Co-op stopped shipping snails for a little while. They did, as I say. Otherwise, you could see if Co-op had any plans of getting them, but I'm pretty confident they stopped shipping snails. Canny will, of course, correct me if I'm wrong. And beyond that, the only other place I could think of off the top of my head would be something like Wet Spot Tropical Fish or like Aquatic Arts. I don't know why I spaced on name. I was like, it's something arts. Aquarium Arts? No, that's wrong. My brain just... But those are probably some of your best options. Of course, there's also Aquabid. You might have better luck with some like guy who actually has them or has like figured out how to breed them. You know, 'cause they can breed in salt water, right? So you might have something. There is like a version of basically a smaller neorite snail that's actually fresh water that I've seen someone who's breeding them, and I basically said, I want those whenever you have spares. Because they look super cool. They're not horned, but they're like a mini neorite that breeds very slowly in fresh water. And they eat just like the neorites we're used to, but smaller version, and very slowly replicate inside freshwater too, which I think is really cool personally. Woo! There's the chat jump. I've been waiting for that. Again, if I miss your question, feel free to repost it or shoot me an email, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. I'm going to end pretty strictly at 7, as close as I can, because I'd really like if you guys want to go on either A, go to Dr. Black, my Aussie buddy, or B, Dr. Black, not to throw you under a bus, buddy, but the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society has a great chat about killifish. Hold on, I'll get the link in chat. They're technically live now, but they don't start for another few minutes. But that's them. It's our once a month meeting. It's a great chat on killifish with Art Luterman. Super cool dude. But otherwise, go see my buddy Dr. Black. He's a great dude. My Aussie buddy, who starts usually like 7:15-ish or so. So like 15 minutes from now. All right. Not the same one. Okay, so kind of from it's Polish last name. Good to know, Raphael. Thank you. I think there's some amount of Polish in my blood. We just don't know. We don't know. We're American mutts. We got a lot of stuff in there. Whoa, geez, chat jumping again. Well, Gizmo Timo. I think I pronounced that vaguely right. So my Anubis barteri leaves have broken water surface in my 50-gallon. Any thoughts? What would you do? I would let it happen, because that sounds awesome. If it's not known, like, I like when plants break the water surface. I think it's a really cool thing, because it's very much what nature does. Realistically, you could trim those leaves off, and the ones that are below the surface will do fine, and it will regrow new leaves. You just don't cut the rhizome. Just cut, like if this is the rhizome and you've got the leaf coming off here, clip about like right here, right? Does that make sense? You leave a little bit of room. It will regrow leaves. I used to do this all the time when they got like too much dust algae on the surface with some of my Anubias barteri golden, the Nana golden, because I put way too much light on them. But yeah, it will regrow. Me personally, I love the way they break the surface, and I would just like let it happen, because that's the kind of fish keeper I am. Also, I'm very lazy. But it's up to you. Like, if you don't like the fact that they're breaking the surface, give them a little clip. If you do like the fact they're breaking the surface, just let them go, man. Let them do their thing. Polar Vortex. How big do Java fern plantlets need to be prior to being glued to something? I try to have enough to where there's a root and the little rhizome that's there, so that I'm not going to coat the roots or the full of the rhizome in glue. It's a little harder. It's easier to tie when they're really small, because you can get a plant that's only like this big and friction fit or tie it in place, and it will naturally, over the course of the next couple weeks, root into that surface and grab hold on its own. But if you need glue to hold it in place, or you need twine to hold it in place, then you just want to make sure that you're not putting so much glue down that it covers the whole thing, because that will kill it. But if you can get just a little bit on like the backside and push it into place, you'll do just fine. Passion fruit, Latin name on the freshwater neorites. They were in the forum for Aquarium Co-op, and I would have to look them up. But shoot me an email. I'll find it for you. Because they're super cool. There's somebody who had a post about them and talked about them, and I basically said, gimme. Because I wanted to keep them. All right, guys. We're at 7 o'clock. I'm going to answer like one last question if it shows up quickly. Excuse me. Actually, I got one. Burnt popcorn. I'm getting 8 blue Emperor Tetras in a couple days in a 20 high with a King Betta. Is this a problem? In theory, no. The Tetras should be able to get away from the Betta, and they shouldn't nip the Betta too much, but just monitor. I mean, it's one of those tough things where, like, you kind of need to monitor, and if there is a problem, either one, sequester one away from the other, like you could use a breeder box to give the Betta kind of a small refuge, or two, decide which one you want to keep. I hate to say that normally, but it shouldn't be an issue. There should be enough room for everybody to get along and do their thing. Should be. All right, last one. Passion fruit. Again. Tricky. There's something from E Littles, too. I'll have to do both of those. I'll do both real fast. Is Crypt Wendetii Florida Sunset still on the market? I haven't seen it for sale in years. From what I remember, Tropica might own the copyright to the variety. So, it's not... I don't think it's Tropica. It's Florida Aquatic Nurseries is the one that... So, FAN is what they're normally known as. They're the ones that got the variety in the first place and, like, made the name for them. I have not seen them actively for sale. However, I keep a ton of them. And I've been growing them out like crazy because I know that people want to get them. And I'm trying to grow enough to where I could sell a batch without basically destroying my own personal stockpile of that particular crypt because it's really, really cool. So your best bet might be passion fruit to see if your local store works with FAN, Florida Aquatic Nurseries, or if you can get in touch with them to see if they still sell that variety of crypt. But yeah, that's where the Florida Sunset comes from as well. 'Cause it's down in Florida, it's Florida Aquatic Nurseries. But yeah, that's their special version of Wendetii. It's just a cultivar that they've done, kind of like how Pink Panther or Pink Flamingo has a cultivar by cultivating a recessive gene in the plant. All right, E-Littles. Going from 3 stands that use 8 cinder blocks to 2 stands that use 12 cinder blocks. All right. Also want to reset the tanks. Any advice on the best way to do this? Temp tanks would be HDX containers. So I would be... Man, that's tough because you're going from, like, very different numbers. You'd almost be best if you had a way to, like, literally do the whole thing in one shot. Or if you could move them in different places to where you could set up the new ones, move everything over, and then tear down. But I understand you're trying to reuse tanks and stuff. The problem basically just comes down to, because of the complete difference in the way that your racks are going to be, you basically have to do it all in one go. Which means a lot of temporary containers holding fish, and then moving from there. It will suck, but it can be done. All right. With that being said, guys, if you have any questions left over, Candy just posted my email in chat, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. I usually respond within 2 to 3 days. Sometimes it's a little longer when the week's real crazy, but I will get back to you. I absolutely promise. And with that being said, if either check out Dr. Black or check out the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society's meeting, that fantastic talk with Art Luterman on killifish. If you're not really a killifish person, check out Dr. Black. If you're thinking, I want to learn about killifish, check out the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society. I'll be back next week. We'll have a new topic. Look forward to this weekend's video on Saturday. I think you're going to like it. And if so, make sure to let me know down in the comments, because that means I'll do more of them. Thank you, as always, to the Super Mod, Candy Overhauls. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, stay awesome. Zach, what's up, buddy? I haven't seen you in a while. Take care, guys.